Our next presenter is Professor Hagit Messer-Yaron from Tel Aviv University from the Department of Electrical Engineering Systems. Although she's from the Department of Electric Engineering System, I think she knows about intellectual property more than most of the lawyers here do. Hagit was the chief scientist of the Science Ministry, and she was very instrumental in incorporating Israel into the European Research and Development Agreements, the 5th framework and the 6th framework. And she's a great friend of the Center for Information Technology. Professor Messer-Yaron, please.
Thank you. Spend all my time on the introduction. Thank you all. Everyone? Yeah. First, I want to thank all Niva and Michael for inviting me. I'm the only scientist here, and I don't speak your language fluently, but I'll try my best. The title, for example, is creative. This is the intellectual properties of Niva. So you can do whatever you want to do with it. And I will try to focus problems. Okay. This is the outlines of my talk, and although the title of this conference has to do with the global view, I'm going to talk from the point of view of the IP rules of a university or a public research organization, which is not even national, but since science is global, it is very global in the sense that it's very similar in many places around the world. After reviewing some basic principles in the IP rules in public research organization, I will tell you something about how does science work, in case that you forgot what you learned in school or some other time. And then I will point out on some difficulties in implementation of the IP rules because of the inherent contradictions with the nature or the spirit of the science. I will come up with 3 examples. And since we are going to point out on difficulties, then the question, why does it work, because we assume it works, is a legitimate question. We'll try to show why does it work, and then we will ask what next. So first, just to give you the global flavor, I quote here from the ICSTI statement, which is entitled Utilizing IP for Competitive Advantage, published about a year ago. And the first question, what are ICSTI? Nobody knows. The I stands for Irish. So this paper came out, the Irish Council for Science and Technology. And among other things, they pointed out some common points that need to be taken care of in policies of public research organizations. I emphasize 2 of them, but the list is quite longer. The 2 that I'm going to talk about is the ownership of intellectual properties and disclosure by the researchers to the PRO. PRO stands for Public Research Organization, of research with commercial potential. I give one short example from Israeli Public Research Institute, the Weizmann Institute. As you all know, the Weizmann Institute is very successful in terms of technology transfer. Actually, last week there was in Haaretz an article saying that the Weizmann Institute achievements is like the 3rd in the world and better than Harvard and other important American universities. But, and you can find these IP rules on the internet in English, so you can look at it. I just took part of it which defined institute invention. And the institute invention is are defined as discoveries, which are discovered, arrived at, or developed by scientists as a consequences of and or during the period of their employment, and this is the important part, or other relationship, meaning not only employees but also students, postdoc, etc. And then it also said that discovery which are made during the period of employment or other relationship with the institute, which is totally unrelated to science or technology, shall not be deemed as institute invention. So these are the two things that I want to emphasize. But if you look at the rules or guidelines of all research universities in Israel and many others all around the world, there are some common principles in all of them, and I pointed here 4 of them. The first one everywhere says that the researcher must disclose to the PRO any research of commercial potential. Then, regarding ownership, the PROs own the intellectual property of institute inventions, and as you saw in the previous transparency, in the previous slide, the definition of institute invention is quite wide. Institute inventions are discovered of employees and others. And again, I will talk a little bit about who the others are. And the others should be related to the PROs, that they are not necessarily employees. And the 4th point, I don't think I have time to say much about it. But what I wanted to emphasize here, that a discovery which is according to the PRO officials is totally unrelated shall not be deemed as institute invention. But the entity that makes this decision, if it is related or no, is the PRO. So now let's move a little bit to basic science or science. What is it, how it works? And just to remind you, I'm talking about basic science. I put basic in parentheses because I don't like, personally, this phrase. I rather talk about academic science because the idea or the main feature of basic science or academic science is that it is totally based on academic freedom, on freedom of research. And this is very important because everything comes out of this basic principle. For example, basic science is a bottom-up research. The research problem is defined by the researcher. Under the academic freedom, under the freedom of research, nobody, neither the dean or the rector of the university, can tell any of us what to study. Don't laugh. Yeah, so if you see, this is the last point here. But at least theoretically, we are talking about a bottom-up research. We are talking about curiosity-driven research, meaning that a scientist can work on any research problem in any field he or she is interested in. Actually, I'm in electrical engineering and I'm doing some interesting research in other fields also. As Eli suggested, practical consideration as promotion, equipment, availability of support, etc., usually confine researcher to specific fields. But again, these are some compromises that we need to do, but in a way it's against the academic freedom, but still the bottom line decision is of the individual researcher. So how does basic science work? Roughly speaking, step 1 is to come up with an idea. The idea should be phrased as a research question, but the question is how one comes with an idea. Usually, at least my experience is that the idea is triggered by one of the following. Many ideas come from discussion with peers. Many of them are in conferences, international conferences, peers all around the world, in cafeteria, like the famous story of Watson and Crick, who came up with the double helix, etc. So talking and discussions, informal discussion and formal discussion, is a good trigger for research ideas. Many ideas come from students. Actually, this is the main resource that we have, at least in Israel. We have the most brilliant students, which is great fun to work with, and they come sometimes with excellent research ideas. Some ideas come from material we read, books, paper, proposal, manuscripts, etc. So this is the first step, to get a question, an idea. Then the next step is to make a research plan out of it, and the research plan is usually done by the chief investigator, the principal investigator. I will refer to it as the PI. Step 3 is actually conducting the research. For this, sometimes we need equipment, we need money, we need other things. But after conducting the research according to the research plan, then we get some initial results. Once getting the results, we start to discuss these results. We present them to peers, to students, in conferences, in meetings. This is the way it is done. And then in step 4, we evaluate the initial results, again with peers, students, etc. According to the evaluation, we revise the research plan, and we go back to step 2. And it can go forever. At one point, it may be defined as a potential patent, or it may be defined as something with a commercial potential, and then we look at it. Anyway, who is involved with this process, scientific process? As I said, the PI, the principal investigator, is the responsible person. But in all stages of the scientific research, many others are involved, formally and informally. Students or co-investigators, they are on the formal part, but informally you talk to many people. Specific research results are usually built of layers and parts supported by different sources, for example, and it's very hard, almost impossible, to isolate the contributors to the resulting IP in terms of what you need to file a patent. I just want to note two things. One is science is inherently global, so I don't talk anymore about globalization. But the other thing that I quoted here, and I don't know exactly where it was taken from, is that science is like parachute. It doesn't function unless it is open. Openness is very important for science, and this is, of course, different culture than what you need for protecting IP. Now let's talk about a few difficulties in implementing these IP rules. The first one is disclosure. As I said, most rules ask disclosure by the researcher to PRO of research with commercial potential. Now, how can this be implemented? When does one identify commercial potential? I just described to you the process, the scientific process. So what you can get out of it, there are two extreme situations. In option one, that the commercial potential is identified in step 1, meaning in this, you have an idea and you think, wow, it has a commercial potential. In that case, if you need to disclose it to the technology transfer office, usually they put restriction on what you can do with it. And what I claim is that if indeed it is disclosed in this stage, that open science is questionable. Instead of science, open science, basic science, the way I described before, it is going to become industrial project and not a scientific project anymore. The other option, that the commercial potential is identified in step 4, meaning while you are evaluating the results of your research, somebody come out and say, you know what, you can use it in some commercial equipment or something. If indeed science goes the way I described before, if you come up and disclose the commercial potential at this stage, I'm claiming that patenting is questionable due to prior presentation, publication, multiple sources of financial support, etc. So the technical question is when to disclose the innovation is problematic for implementation. The other difficulty is students. Again, quoting for this report of the Irish report, they said, and this is general, for third-level educational institution, some include students as well as staff research under the policy, the IP policies. Also in all universities in Israel, students are included. And then I raised three questions. The first one is, what is the legal status of, when we are talking about students, usually we are talking about graduate students, research students. So I'm asking what is the legal status of this student regarding institute invention. I know about the Israeli patent law, and it doesn't say anything about students. It says something about employees, and students are not necessarily employees. The second question is, who owns the IP in a thesis or dissertation of a student? Is it the student? Is it the advisor? Maybe both, maybe the public research organization, the university. And the third question is, suppose a public research university come up with a policy saying that all IPs belong to the university. Can indeed the public research organization enforce its IPR policy on the students? I'm not sure about it. The third difficulty that I want to mention is regarding facilities and mobility, which are two things that are part of modern science in many fields. In old or traditional science, each principal investigator used to have its own complete lab. So if I needed some equipment, I used to get it and to have it in my own lab, and that's it. This is not the case anymore. Modern science, sometimes people refer to big science. You can see much of it in biotech, scientific research, and so on. Then the equipment becomes too expensive, and it is not the case anymore that each scientist can have it in its own lab. So research equipment need to be shared. Usually, the situation, at least in Israel, that there is some equipment in one university and researchers from other universities come to use it. And the question is, what about IPs created by a scientist of one university or public research organization using facilities of another public research organization? I must say that in most guidelines of universities in Israel, the use of research facilities by itself puts it as the owner of the equipment. The university that owns the equipment can have rights, ownership on the intellectual property that are created using these facilities. I'm not sure how good it is from the legal point of view, but it's very bad from science point of view, because science needs this open atmosphere that you can use it efficiently. The other aspect is mobility. As you know, we are all going around, spending time in other universities. And one question is, who owns intellectual property created by scientists of one PRO while being on sabbatical on another PRO? In many cases, you can find contradicting rules. The university or the PRO where the scientists on sabbatical belong to say, all intellectual properties are mine because you are my employee. And then the hosting PRO said, since you work here, this is my intellectual properties. I just point out on some difficulties. You should come up with answers probably, but the question is now, if there are so many difficulties, why does it work? So why does it work? The first question is, does it? Let's assume it does work, because that's the way all people like to show. And I missed Manuel talk yesterday, but according to what I heard, he showed you some numbers saying, yeah, it works fantastically. We have many startups, spin-off, patents, so everyone is happy. So let's assume it works, and we ask why. What I'm saying, and here I can only say something about my Israeli experience. In Israel, the scientists, university, industry relations are based on goodwill, not on the rules, not on the guidelines, not on the law, but only on goodwill. Universities' patents are hardly challenged. Okay, there are issues, and then there are deals, cuts, one way or the other, but to the best of my knowledge, it has never been really challenged and taken to court. Leaks of knowledge, if identified, for example, if one of the employees, the researcher, the student, doesn't obey the rules, Nobody is going to force it. Usually, if such links are identified, they are settled by agreements between the different partners. As I said, university rules, they serve as guidelines and not as rules. They are rarely enforced, and they are almost never taken to court. On the individual researcher level, the conflicted interests nowadays are somehow balanced. At one hand, the individual researcher is interested in academic freedom. On the other hand, all rules give the researcher some economic benefits, like either part of the revenues, research grants, etc. So the last slides relates to what next, and this is my own opinion. What next? In Israel, but not only in Israel, unless more public money is put into science, PROs must or will continue to try to turn science into gold, which in turn change science. Actually, the previous talk referred to this. I don't think that I should say more about it. What I'm saying is that even if you don't like it, that's the way it is. We need to face it and we need to see what we can do with it. My observation is that present practice of technology transfer in Israel and also other places serves mostly short-term interests of the three stakeholders, the industry, the PROs, the public research organization, and the researchers. But I want to emphasize that from my point of view, these are short-term interests. I think that the long-term interests need to be balanced, and what I claim is to balance long and short-term public interest. The legislation, the rules, and the practice of technology transfer will need to be modified, to be changed. These changes, if nothing happens, it will take time. Evolution is a slow process. But I claim the changes will be accelerated if legal actions will be taken by either stakeholders. Thank you.